Welcome back to our last video on this blog app. So we have two changes we're going to make. The first one is to implement the Express sanitizer that I mentioned, which will help us with that problem where if we're displaying HTML, if we're actually rendering HTML, a user could potentially enter some harmful JavaScript instead of a script tag. We don't want to run that code. So we use a sanitizer to help us with that. Basically takes that input and it removes all scripts out of it and just gives us the pure HTML. And then we also want to style the index page a bit. It's looking a little bit rough. And the last thing we'll do is make a small update to our RESTful routes table, just to make it a little more useful for you. So let's begin with the sanitizer. So I'm going to install a package called express-sanitizer --save. Okay, now that that's done, in our app.js, we're going to require that. So express sanitizer equals require express-sanitizer. Just like that. And then we have to tell our app to use it. App.use express sanitizer. And the only requirement is that this goes after body parser, this line here. Okay? And that's it. Now to use it, we want to do it to start instead of our create. So when you create a new blog. So it's really create and update are the two places where we're taking data and saving it to the database. Both times we want to make sure to sanitize the input. And instead of create, what we want to sanitize is request.body.blog.body, which is kind of a mess. Remember, request.body is whatever's coming from the form, or whatever data is in the request body, which in our case is coming from a form. Then blog is because of this line right here. Blog title, blog image, and finally blog body. And this is the one that we care about. So we have to do blog.body. So it's kind of a long name here, but request.body.blog.body. And we're going to change it so that it's equal to request.sanitize, and we're going to sanitize this entire thing. So we're taking what it's currently equal to, sanitizing it, and then changing the entire request.body.blog.body to equal that. So let me make that a little clearer for you. Let's do a console.log request.body before and after. Just like that. And let me add in something to make it a little easier to see. Great. Okay, so let's give it a shot now. Start the server. Refresh the page. We will have to create a new post. Let's make one just called demo, random image, and let's add in some good HTML that we want a user to enter, and then something bad, which will just be an alert again. There we go. So if this works, we should see the before has both of these and the after only has this. Let's take a look at what's console.logged. Perfect. You can see the first time body was equal to this, where we had our script tag in there. The second time, body only has the h1. So that's all we have to do to sanitize something. And if we now display it, if we go to our new post, which I believe is this one here, and we take a look, we're displaying the HTML, but there's no script tag at all. So that works great. The last thing we want to do is run the same code, but do it instead of the update. Here we are, right there. Before we update request.body.blog, we'll do the same thing. A minor note, this would be a good use case for what's known as a middleware, which we haven't really talked about yet, but it's something that we're repeating 2 times in 2 different routes. What we can do is write a middleware which will run this code before these 2 routes. But we'll cover middleware later in this course towards the end of Express. So we're leaving it how it is for now. And that works just fine. That will sanitize it both times, when you update and when you create. Next, let's focus on our index.ejs. So it needs a little bit of work. Looks like this right now. let's start by deleting a few things. And that was one of the posts that I had created before we added the sanitizer in. So I'm going to delete some of these ones that don't have images, just so that we end up with something easier to style where we can actually see the images. Okay, so we have these. What we want to do is center them to start, and I'm going to use a lot of the code that we already have used. So inside of our index, we have our header, that's good, but then we're going to put everything inside of a div, and this div will have class equal to UI main text container, which is what gives us that centered container. And then inside we'll have our div, and this is basically recycled from the last little line, the last little bit we wrote for the forms and for the show page. So class equals UI huge header, and then we'll just put, instead of index page, let's just put RESTful blog app, just like that. And then when we have that done, we'll add in another div. This one will have our segment in it, which gives us UI top attached segment. That gives us that little line, the box. And then inside of there, we're going to be looping through, and we still have one more line before we even get to the loop, which is a div with class UI divided items. And then for each item, we go inside of UI divided items, and we get an automatic divider put between them. So we're going to copy this code into this UI divided items, but we do need to make some changes. So the first is just to indent, but we're not just going to print this. Inside, we're going to create a div class equal to item, and then inside the item, we have our image first. And the image will go inside of a div with class equal to image. And we'll put that right there. And that will help constrain the size of the image so we don't get those gigantic images taking up the entire screen anymore. Okay, so div class image, put the image inside. Then we need another div class equal to content. And this is where we'll put a few things. The first one is the title. And rather than making an H2 with the title, we're actually going to make an anchor tag. And our anchor tag will have class equal to header, but we'll also have href equal to the show page, which I'm just going to copy that URL here, just like that, which we already have for the read more link. So the reason we're doing this is so that we can end up with our header for each blog. I can click on it to go to the show page or click on read more. Let's make sure. Looks like we have a small syntax error. We're missing our closing quote right here for href. Whoops. Okay, so href is the show page, and then inside the brackets we have the blog title. It's kind of a mess. Then after that, we'll add in a div with class equal to meta, which is just a place for us to put information about this particular item, which in our case will just be a span with the date, which we already have. But I'm going to format this date as well. So blog.created.toDate string, which we already saw on the show page. And then we close that div there. And then we'll have a div class equal to description. And that's where we'll put this content, the actual body of the blog. And rather than doing equal sign, we'll change it back to a dash. Or not change it back, but we'll change it to a dash so that we get the actual HTML content that's now sanitized. Lastly, we'll add a div class equal to extra, and inside of that, we'll put the button to read more, and we'll make an anchor tag, and I'm going to copy the anchor tag we already have and change it just a little bit. So we don't need the class equal to header anymore. What we do want instead is a large button. So UI floated, basic, pick your color, I'll do violet again, button. And we can indent this a little bit. It's definitely a lot to look at. So let's split this up just a little bit. So after the opening here, then inside the anchor tag we'll have read more, and we'll add on an icon. a chevron icon, which will just be a little arrow after read more. Okay, marathon there, lots of stuff we added in. Let's just make sure everything is looking okay. And definitely just take a look at the solution code if you don't want to type this from scratch. Let's see how it's looking. Hopefully you don't have any syntax errors. There we go, just what we were looking for. So we're truncating the first 100 characters, and then, or as many characters as there are in this post. In this case, it's very short. Click on read more. The link works, takes us to the show page. We can edit, go back. We have our images here. We have the divided lines. We have our header. We have this segment going around everything. And we're done pretty much. So again, definitely don't feel like you have to know all of these classes. I kind of just gave them to you rapid fire style because the point is not that you learn all of these. But if you do want to learn more, go to semantic-ui.com. There's a lot of great tutorials and resources. It's still not as widely used as Bootstrap, but it's definitely growing. I've noticed a lot of my students would find it on their own, whereas in the past I would introduce it to them after Bootstrap. In the two most recent classes I taught, the students really quickly fell in love with it without me ever showing it to them, and they ended up using it over Bootstrap, most students. But totally up to you. I enjoy both of them, and Bootstrap is definitely more popular for now. Okay, so the last thing I mentioned we'd do is refactor our table just a tiny bit, and all I want to do is add in a final column for the mongoose method that corresponds to each one of these. So find by ID and update, find by ID and remove, and so on. And it'll be a quick review of how tables work. So here's the chart.html. We need to add in another th, and we'll just call it mongoose method. And let's open up the preview by clicking preview, and I'll move it to the bottom here. There's our table, our new th. And then for index, we'll add a td, and the mongoose method there for dogs would be dog.find. There we go. Next up, we have new, which actually doesn't have a mongoose method at all. So rather than leaving it blank, I'll just put NA. All that it does is render a form. Next, we have create, and create is going to do a dog.create. And one really cool feature, if you do this live preview, is as I'm editing the HTML, notice that it shows me what I'm selecting down here, which is pretty cool. So you don't even have to open up the inspector. You can just see live. And as I change things, they update live as well without having to save or refresh the page. Okay, so then we have show, which does a dog.findById. Then we have edit, which also does a dog.findById. We have to find the dog that we're editing, and that's for the form. And then update does a dog.findById and update, long one. And delete is also somewhat long. Dog.findById and remove. There we go. Let's take a look. Here's our table. It looks like I accidentally deleted one of the TDs here, which is supposed to display what update does. So update is supposed to update dog, let's do particular dog, then redirect somewhere. All right, now we should be back to normal. Here's our table. So the only one that doesn't have any mongoose methods at all is going to be new, because new is not finding anything in the database, it's not adding anything, it just renders us a form. Great, so hopefully this is useful for you in the future. You can refer to this table. I'll be referring back to it certainly. It covers a lot of important information that we'll be using a lot. All right, so we've finished with this. Now we get to move on to some more fun things, some more complicated apps. I know it was a little bit of a marathon, covered a lot. It's always a tough one to make interesting because just a lot of information, but it's important to have that CRUD ability. Be able to create, read, update, and delete an entity takes a lot of routes. All right, I'll see you in the next unit.